All right, and as I said in the open there, we're going to do a solo open here on the LSU Tigers. They kicked off spring practice last week on March 9th and leading up to their spring game, which will be on April 22nd. So I wanted to dive into the LSU Tigers as well, coming off a 10-4 season, 6-2 in the SEC in the first year under head coach Brian Kelly. I'm a guy that believes Brian Kelly is a terrific coach. I thought that was a great hire by LSU, getting him. I ranked him going into the season as the third best coach in the SEC, which I got a lot of pushback on that one, which is to be expected. But a really great year for LSU under year one under Brian Kelly. Kind of struggled there at the end, losing Texas A&M in shocking fashion. Not that the result was shocking, like how A&M won, just the fact A&M won the game at all was shocking. Just going in, thought, okay, LSU's going to take care of business. Have two losses going into the SEC championship game. They'll be 10-2, only one loss in SEC play. And then that happened in Georgia, the 50-30 loss there. Because really, when you look at LSU going into that A&M game, there's people talking, hey, if they come out, they do what they're supposed to here, they beat A&M, and then if they were to upset Georgia in the SEC championship game, perhaps as a two-loss SEC champion, they could get in because they just beat the number one team, the defending national champions. So a lot of people thought, hey, maybe they could, maybe they get in, but obviously that didn't happen. Ended up with four losses. They did go win the bowl game, 63-7. The team has a lot of returning starters, 13. A lot of big players are coming back for this LSU team. That's why everybody's kind of penciling Alabama as the SEC West champion next season. Look, they may do it. Now Alabama's one of the favorites, obviously, without a doubt. No disrespect. But let's remember what LSU is, what this team is, what they were last year, and who they've got coming back on this team. We're going to look at the offense and defense on what LSU's got returning to the field this upcoming season. And like I said, let's jump up over there onto the offense first. And you got your quarterback, Jaden Daniels, return. That's always a big deal when you have your quarterback returning, especially one that was as productive and successful as Jaden Daniels was last season. He threw for 2,913 yards, 17 touchdowns to just three interceptions, almost 70% completion percentage, right at 69. He was a leading rusher on the team with 885 yards, 11 touchdowns on 106 attempts. We'll get more into his stats and position as the leading rusher last year a little bit when we get into running backs. This was the number 5 passing team in the SEC last year. I don't think a lot of people would think, oh, yeah, LSU's number 5. That's one of the best passing teams in the SEC. I don't think a lot of people think about that, but they averaged 269.3 yards per game through the air. What is huge for them going into the year, and Malik Neighbors coming back, their best receiver, 72 catches, 1,017 yards, 3 touchdowns last season. But and then comes into the spring stuff with LSU. What are we looking for? What do we want to see? Uh, who's going to be the number 2 receiver on this team? Kayshawn Boutte and Jere Jenkins are off to the NFL. Honestly, with the Boutte part of this thing, I think it's probably better for the team that he's not there. Boutte wasn't a distraction. He didn't cause any problems. Early on, it was a big storyline, and he played better as the year went on, but it just did not connect with him in the offense like it did the year prior when he was an All-American type player. And I just think him not being there now, there's no question who's the go-to guy. It's Malik Neighbors. That is the guy you're going to look for down the field. But with that said, you also have to figure out who's going to be your number 2 receiver, and pictured up on the screen on YouTube, courtesy. These photos come from Sports Illustrated, but I got Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors up there. Just figures better you have to look at the picture of players I'm talking about instead of just looking at me talking to this microphone forever, how long this segment goes. But some players that do have returning from last year that could look to step up in that number 2 role. Brian Thomas, he had 31 catches, 361 yards last year, and 5 touchdowns. Kyron Lacey, no touchdowns, 24 catches, 268. So those are some players you would hope that we could take that next step. Find out who's going to be that number 2 option at the receiver spot. Now, who may be the second go-to receiver may not even be a receiver. It could be tight end. Mason Taylor coming back, big catch against Alabama. He's a very dependable tight end, very capable tight end. Look, when we talk about SEC tight ends, it goes to Brock Bowers first. Obviously, he's the best. I mean, that got to be a first-round draft pick if he could come out right now. But Mason Taylor, he's one of the better tight ends in the conference. 38 catches last year for 414 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, What are they going to do? Offensive line and the run game. So last season, rework the offensive line. You do have mostly all your guys back. Freshman tackles from last year, Will Campbell, Emory Jones. So take that next step as sophomore. That'd be big for their spring. You have Charles Turner, Miles Frazier, and Garrett Dellinger coming back to as well on offensive line. They do bring in a Maryland transfer in Mason Lunsford as well. That's got to get better because the run game, to me, from the running backs was a very inconsistent part of this team. I talked about Jaden Daniels. He 885, 11 touchdowns as the leading rusher. He also had the most attempts on this team with 186 rush attempts. Of course, that was some of that, and a lot of that was off running plays, scrambles, and stuff like that. But the design run game going to the running backs has got to get better. Josh Williams had 532 last year. Noah Kane had 409. John Emery had 375. None of those running backs had over 100 carries on the season. Josh Williams had like 97 or 98 carries on the season. They have to lean more on that, take some of that pressure off Jaden Daniels as a runner at quarterback. Yes, have him in the design run game. And of course, when a play breaks down, he can escape and make something out of it. But you're also putting him at more risk for injury when he's having to do a big workload as a runner and a passer. And you saw he got injured. He was ineffective at times in the SEC championship game. We're about to jump into something about that too as well. So the running backs have to do better. So Jaden Daniels is not responsible for beating the run game and the pass game. So that's something I want to look at LSU. But improved offensive line play. They gave up 45 sacks last year. Probably would have gave up more if you had a more traditional drop back passer, not a guy like Jaden Daniels who can move and make plays with his legs when the play does break down. Now, quarterback, we're going to go back to that. There's not a quarterback controversy in Baton Rouge, in my opinion. Jaden Daniels is your number one guy, without a doubt. But they are a team with a very, very good luxury of having two quarterbacks, and that is Garrett Nussmeier sitting behind him. Last season threw for 800 yards, 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 62%. Mostly mop-up duty, but he really made a name for himself and caught a lot of attention in the second half against Georgia in the SEC championship game and his performance in the bowl game against Purdue. When he came in and played in relief of Jaden Daniels against Georgia, he was 15 to 27, 294 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Like I said, that was a 50 to 30 loss there. And some might say, well, Georgia was playing back. They weren't really playing their base defense. Look, Kirby Smart thought it was a big deal after, and it was a big deal because look what Ohio State did to him as well. That was a good performance by Garrett Nussmeier. You should not take it away from him. Don't let them Georgia fans do that if you're an LSU fan or if you're Garrett Nussmeier. Then in the bowl game against Purdue in the Citrus Bowl, 63-7 win, 11-15, 173 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. So you look at those numbers. Okay, LSU has a good problem potentially when you have more than one quarterback. Now, like I said, going to the spring, Jaden Daniels is your number one quarterback. But what if Garrett Nussmeier takes that leap? He really takes that next step as a quarterback, and he's able to show that could be the starter. And let's say Jaden Daniels stays the same, which is not bad. Good quarterback. He stays if he's what he was last year, that's good for LSU. But you want to take next step. That's what you want to do each year's quarterback. Get better, get better, get better. Well, if Garrett Nussmeier gets better, then LSU's in a tough situation now because you're looking at a deal where you've got two quarterbacks. And if Garrett Nussmeier is leaping over Jaden Daniels during the spring and in the fall, then you got to make a decision for that first game. And look, that first game, you're not playing a directional school, or I hate to use this term because I cover high school football, but almost like a high school team where you're like, okay, we can play both quarterbacks, figure out who our guy is. We don't have to really worry about losing this game either. Well, you're playing Florida State first, who's going to be a top 10 team as well. We're going to get into Florida State with Mike McDaniel in a little bit. But so you cannot do that in that situation. You've got to know who your starting quarterback is. You can't have any question. You don't need to be pulling one in. You need to be solid in who your quarterback is, because that's a game you could lose. So it's going to be big in the spring, big in the fall. Jaden Daniels develops more. He just keeps on that track of development. He's your quarterback. But if Garrett Nussmeier shows that improvement that he could be the guy. Brian Kelly and the staff's going to have, I think, a situation or a big decision to make on who's going to be that quarterback in that opener. Now let's jump into the defense for LSU. We'll throw a photo of Harold Perkins up there, photo courtesy of the Tiger Rag. On defense, this was the sixth total defense last year in 2022. Gave up 23.7 points per game in the SEC. Defense tackles, this is big for LSU. They're really good at defensive tackle coming in this year. They were good last year at Makai Wingo. Missouri transfer going into last year, third-team All-American, did a fantastic job for this LSU defense. Now, returning this year, now you won't see him in the spring, Mason Smith on the defense line. Towards Achilles, ACL tear in the opener against Florida State. So you get him back. If he lives up to the expectations he was coming close to living up to, or the expectations he had going into last season, you got a talented duo there at defensive tackle. And it's not just on one guy. Now, where I see on the defensive front where LSU has some questions to be answered, some holes to fill, that's at defensive end when it comes to edge rusher off the defensive line. You got to replace B.J. Ojolari and Ollie Gay, both combined for 8 sacks last season. Those are really 2 good pass rushers. Now, they have a guy returning, Savion Jones, who had 5 sacks and 14 pressures in 2022. Those stats are courtesy of PFF. Now, they added in some transfer in Parashand from Arizona. They have a really great incoming freshman, Deshaun Womack, 5-star per on 3. As a senior in high school, 15 sacks and 26 tackle for losses, number 12 prospect coming out. But for LSU, that's a big question here. We're going to talk about a linebacker that's really good at getting to the quarterback in a second. But you got to find those guys off the edges that can help with the pass rush on the defensive line. Defensive tackle, they've got it there, but defensive end, they've got some talented players there. Just filling that role with more guys that can get after quarterback, because that's some pretty solid quarterbacks in the SEC. So you got to be able to get after those guys and disrupt them. Now, the ultimate disruptor, that's what LSU has in Harold Perkins. This is a guy, he's one of the best players in college football, in my opinion. Obviously one of the best players in SEC, if I'm making that statement. As a freshman, he just controlled games. He took over games at times, and he completely dominated the Arkansas game. LSU offensively was not good that day. They won 13-10 because of Harold Perkins and what he was able to do, and really just disrupted the whole flow of the Arkansas offense. Last season, Harold Perkins, 72 tackles, 7.5 sacks. He had 1 interception and 3 forced fumbles. Now, my big question with him, though, he's really good at getting to the quarterback. He's really at disrupting stuff in the backfield, but on the run defense, get improvement there. So he's going to be a strict pass rusher, or is he going to be more of a traditional linebacker in that mode? I think you might want to be a mixture of the two. But if you get what you get last year, that's a big. But obviously, as a freshman, he's looking to get even better. This is a guy, really, if he could come out and draft, I think I would take him first round, without a doubt, because what he can do. He's one of those talented players that can just take over a game and really disrupt your offense. So with him, it all starts there, and that's a good place to start at, because, he just can cover up so much. Because the secondary, there's going to be a question. We'll see what happens in the spring, what players step up, if you can get some ideas on what LSU secondary is going to look like this upcoming season. They're going to replace some guys that are no longer there. Jarek Bernard-Converse, Joe Fuka, Jay Ward, Savion Banks, and Michael Gardner. They're gone from the secondary. You do return safeties Greg Brooks and Major Burns, and you have an A&M transfer cornerback in Denver Harris. So recognizing those players in the spring, and obviously, of course, when we get to the fall, on who are going to be those LSU guys in the secondary. What's good for them, though, they've got some good pass rushers. They've got some good defensive linemen, and that can speed up the process with quarterbacks, and that could cover up some inexperience or deficiencies you may have in the secondary, in which they will be tested that first game against Florida State, Jordan Travis, those receivers, but also, Florida State's a big run team too as well. So this defense will be tested out of the gates against the Florida State Seminoles. So that's going to be interesting to see with LSU. And that's kind of like when you're looking at LSU, and I look at this team, I'm telling you, they have a lot returning back from last season. Alabama's got questions at quarterback, receiver. New offensive coordinator Tom Reese. Alabama's going to be good on defense, I think. but Alabama's got some questions to answer, and it's Alabama and Nick Saban. I get that. I know that. So you want to pencil them in every single year in the SEC West. LSU is going to have something to say about that. Now I know they're going when they play each other. LSU will go to Alabama, but LSU and Alabama, that's the best two teams in this that side of the conference, in my opinion. And A&M may have something to say about it too as well, with the Jimbo Fisher Bob Petrino partnership there. They've got some talent on that A&M team as well. So we'll have to see how that all shakes out. But it's going to be intriguing. LSU should not be discounted. This is a team. I do believe Brian Kelly will win a national championship at LSU. I said that when he got hired. I said it after last year. I'm going to say it now here in March. Brian Kelly's one of the best. I still think he's the third best coach in the conference, behind Kirby Smart and Nick Saban. And I did put those in order for a reason. But we'll see. I mean, they're scheduled for next year. Florida State in the opener. But then if you get past that, if they're able to beat Florida State, Grambling State, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Missouri, Auburn, Army, those are all teams you should beat. You could be 8-0 or should be 8-0 if you beat Florida State going into Alabama. That's going to be game day, because I ain't looked at Alabama schedule. We ain't done Alabama yet here on the show. I know people wonder, where's Alabama content? Well, it's going to come eventually. Then you would play Florida and Georgia State. Those two teams you should beat, and then there's A&M. So you beat Florida State, go 8-0 for the first 8 games. Look, there could be upsets. The SEC's tough. Arkansas is not going to be easy. I think Auburn's going to be improved. Ole Miss will be a tough game going there. But then you got Alabama and A&M in November. So it could be a big – I see LSU at worst as a 9-win team. But this team has got some stuff set up, and none of those big games are back-to-back. Florida State first game, and then you don't play Alabama till November 4th, and then you play A&M November 25th. So everything sets up pretty good for LSU to potentially repeat as the SEC West champion. But what are your thoughts? What do you think about the 2023 LSU Tigers for the spring? And also, what's your thoughts on going up this fall? Can they repeat as the SEC West champions? Am I out of my mind for thinking that? The LSU going to be a team that's going to take a step back. Whatever you think about the LSU Tigers, please go to the comment section, post below, and give me your thoughts. All right, guys, now we're going to jump into the interviews for this week. Once again, the lineup is ACC football with Mike McDaniel, who hosts the basketball conference, the ACC football podcast, and he is a news writer for over at Sports Illustrated. Then we'll jump to Detroit Trojans with Josh Boutwell from Detroit Messenger. And then we'll close it up with a phone conversation with Wes Pruitt from Last Word on College Football and 4-Star Sports Media, where we will talk about the Arkansas Razorbacks. Just a little disclaimer before we jump into these conversations. I recorded all these interviews. We're dropping this on a Wednesday afternoon. And I did the interviews Monday and Tuesday. So different shirts and different one than today. So if you're wondering, does he think he's so good at this that he needs to change shirts after each interview? No. That's just, we recorded these on different days and everything. So I wasn't going to put the same clothes on 2 or 3 days in a row. So if the people on YouTube want to know what's going on with that, there's the explanation. But anyway, here are the 3 conversations. And then after that, I will close the show talking about 64-team college football playoff. Seems like people talk about that every time the NCAA tournament and basketball comes around. But anyways, enjoy these 3 interviews.